So I'm going to introduce our speakers. We have Daniela Onyewuenyi. I'm sorry, Daniela, you'll have to tell your surname when you start speaking. From the Migrant Democracy Project. Welcome, Daniela, and thank you for being here with us today. And we have Emma Harrison from Make Votes Matter. So I'm going to introduce Daniela first. And Daniela from the Migrant Democracy Project is currently a university student who has recently taken up the role of being a spokesperson champion for the Migrant Democracy Project. The Migrant Democracy Project, or MDP, as you may see in several places, is currently campaigning for a residence-based approach to voting to ensure that all that live in the UK have access to their fundamental right and that no one is disfranchised. So, Daniela, I'm going to hand that off to you. You have roughly 5 minutes, and we are here for you.
Thank you so much. Hi, everyone, and thank you all for being here today. And thank you, Martha, for the introduction. As Martha has already said, my name is Daniela Onyewuenyi, and I'm one of the spokespeople for the Migrant Democracy Project. So if you aren't familiar with MDP, we're building migrant power in the UK by getting migrants registered to vote, campaigning for votes for all, and supporting migrants to get elected. More specifically for myself and my group, we champion and run ambassadors for Our Home and Our Vote campaign, which aims to extend the right to vote based on residents across the United Kingdom. It's worth mentioning that all four nations across the UK have their own rules, which make things confusing for a new resident in the country, which could subsequently turn them apathetic to voting altogether. We believe that everyone who lives here are affected by political decisions should have the fundamental right to vote. So my bit of the speech tonight will focus more on voter eligibility rules, as that is kind of a taboo subject within the migrant community across the UK due to the different rules people find difficult. Who can vote, what can they vote on? So that's what I'll be focusing on today. So firstly, I'd like to start with the UK parliamentary elections. So with the UK parliamentary elections, obviously you need to be registered to vote in your own constituency, so where you live, to be of voting age, which as of now is still 18 years old on polling day, to be either a British citizen, qualifying Commonwealth citizen, or a citizen of the Republic of Ireland. And qualifying Commonwealth citizens here means that a person has to leave to remain in the UK. Any leave is acceptable. And you're not subject to any legal incapacity to vote, which means prisoners serving a sentence for a conviction cannot vote in UK parliamentary elections, and neither can peers of the House of Lords. But it's worth noting that the government has just announced that the elections bill, which will lower the voting age to 16 in all UK elections. So it is likely that in the next general election, which has to happen by the 15th of August in 2029, 16-year-olds who meet the nationality requirements, so not all 16-year-olds, will be able to vote. So with England and Northern Ireland, for local elections, including for mayors, councillors, members of the Stormont Assembly, same thing as I just mentioned applies, which means British, Irish and Commonwealth citizens can vote, and some EU citizens, which I will later explain as it can get quite confusing, and overseas voters simply cannot vote in local elections. Now, this is where it actually gets good. This is how Scotland is different from everyone else. So the main difference for Scottish Parliament elections and local elections in Scotland are that registered 16-year-olds and 17-year-olds can vote, and all legal resident, which are foreign nationals, can also register to vote. So that doesn't mean that you have to be a EU citizen. And as of now, convicted prisoners who are detained and serving a sentence of 12 months or less may now actually register to vote in local and Scottish Parliament elections. To note that this only applies to the devolved elections in Scotland, and it does not apply for Westminster Parliament elections. And then lastly, in Wales, the franchise has also been expanded for the Senedd Cymru elections and local elections. Same thing with 16-year-olds and 17-year-olds can vote, and any legal residents once again can vote and just doesn't have to be an EU citizen. But however, the decisions on Police and Crime Commissioner, which is the PCC elections, are still reserved for only the UK government, and the voting age for that still remains 18, and only British citizens and qualifying Commonwealth and Irish citizens can vote for those specific elections. So now regarding about the pernickety of the EU citizens' voting rights. So with the EU citizens living in the UK, it actually depends on where they live. So, as already noted, any foreign national, including EU citizens, can register to vote in devolved elections in Scotland and Wales. So, in England and Northern Ireland, however, the eligibility is that citizens of Denmark, Luxembourg, Poland, Portugal, and Spain, or resident in the UK, have permission to enter or stay in the UK, or the Channel Islands or Isle of Man can register to vote in local elections in England and Northern Ireland because the UK has a bilateral treaties with these countries. Citizens of any other EU country who, on or before the 31st of December of 2020, were legally resident in the UK, had permission to enter or stay in the UK, have remained resident without a break, can register to vote in local elections. But from 2021 onwards, those who are not from a country that has a bilateral voting rights cannot vote at all. And Cyprus and Malta specifically are both EU and Commonwealth countries, so they are able to register for voting rights as Commonwealth citizens. So as you can see, I can understand how that was quite a mouthful. It's quite difficult for many people to wrap their heads around, never mind for someone whose English is not even their first language. So you can imagine how this disenfranchisement can further alienate people, from their own communities and where they live. There are many ways to be involved with MDP, so I would encourage for everyone to check out the website for any further information or any other ways you'd like to be involved with us. But like I've said, the government has just announced the elections bill, which will lower the voting age to 16-year-olds. However, MDP is using this opportunity to ask MPs to propose amendments to the bill, so that franchise is extended to all residents. And you can write their MP with the link on their website, which I will also post after my speech. And just lastly, as an overall, you may be wondering what actually attracted me to become a spokesperson, and it dates to when I was in high school. I do think that I've always had an underlying interest for advocacy and championing people's rights, but there was a specific event where I was invited to speak to a large group of my peers from across different high schools in my area to talk about the importance of voting, especially as a young person. So Scotland is very special in the way it shows young people that they too are part of decision making by allowing us to register to vote at the age of 14 and to register to vote at the age of 14 and to actually vote at the age of 16. And it was that very same fact that made me realise that we too have a voice in politics according to our own laws, regardless of what the media would like to push on a consistent basis. So, as I've already mentioned earlier, Scotland is special in the way and is already steps ahead by using a residence-based approach. So, despite most of us migrants are not eligible to vote in the UK general election unless we drop like £2,000 to get citizenship, we shouldn't lose sight of what we have and can do here. Hence why the co-panelists and I thought it was important to create a space for everyone to learn and understand how voting works in Scotland, as we shouldn't take that for granted or assume that everyone knows how it works. So as an individual, you have 8 different people that represent you and should reflect and amplify your voice in Parliament. One of the 8 MSPs elected will be your constituency MSPs, who represent your local area, and the remaining 7 will be your regional MSPs. So I hope I've given you some insight, and I look forward to hearing everyone's questions during the Q&A. And thank you so much for listening to me tonight.
Thank you so much, Daniela. That was very, very well explained. So now everyone should know who's able to vote. And especially, I quite admired that you explain why you joined politics, and I think that's important. Over to you, Emma. So now we have Emma from Make Votes Matter. Emma is the CEO of Make Votes Matter, the grassroots campaign for proportional representation at Westminster, and believes fair votes for all. She brings extensive experience in campaigning, public affairs, and strategic communication, having held senior leadership roles across the voluntary sector. Emma was the founding chief and executive of IMIX, a non-for-profit communication agency dedicated to shifting public attitudes on migration, and began her career working at the European Parliament that we hope to go. Emma is a chair of Asylum Matters, an organization dedicated to improving policies for and with people seeking asylum and refugees. Welcome, Emma. Thank you for being here, for accepting our invitation. You have your 5 minutes now. Thank you.
Thank you. And everyone, I've got a slide because it helps me keep on track, because otherwise I could talk about a whole bunch of other things. So as Martha said, Make Votes Matter is the national grassroots campaign for proportional representation, because we believe that every vote should count. And I'm afraid right now they don't. And before I just go into the presentation, I'd like to say, right now we know there's a lot of anti-migrant narrative that's being pushed. I'm sorry. You are all very welcome. And there are more people who believe that migrants and immigrants have a home with us than don't. And I think we should all hold that very dear. So I'm sure you've all heard this phrase, but if not, it goes back to like the independence of America, really. No taxation without representation. And that is one of the main reasons that people think that everyone should have a vote. If you pay tax, you should be able to have a say in how this country operates. Now, today I'm going to try and focus on these issues about why voting matters. So number one, but everyone has slightly different control over different issues. And I think that's also important to recognise, that you think, well, I voted once, why do I have to vote again? And I hear that quite a lot. So Westminster, the UK Parliament, has oversight over big things like defence spending and how our terrible immigration system works. It obviously does a lot more, but you can see those are very big picture stuff. Thanks to the devolution that happened quite a while ago now, that you are fortunate that you have a parliament that has control over important and vital issues like education and health. And it's why lots of people do argue that particularly the further education system in Scotland is much better, because it has been devolved and is managed more effectively. Local councils are very different and very important. I know we've got a couple of councillors on the call, and they really manage the services that matter so much to us. So collecting our bins, and if you live south of the border in England, you know that talk about bins happens nearly every day, particularly in places like Birmingham, but also oversees things like housing, and is really integral into the integration of people who are migrants into our communities. Danny said so much better than I did about who gets a vote in Scotland, but just to remind ourselves, a really important thing is the 7th of May this year, there is the Scottish Parliament election, and you must be registered to vote. And it makes me cry so much that people get excited about voting and don't realise they actually have to register. And at the bottom, you'll see there's a link that tells you how to do it. And I'd urge you to tell all your friends, families, and particularly the young people in our lives that it's really important that they register so they do have a vote. And it is great. And as Danny pointed out, the votes at 16, I think, has been transformative for young people as well as the rest of us, but for young people to realise they have a big role in how the future of our governments work. So I'm really glad that the UK is thinking about doing it. So how the election works in Scotland, why I actually really wanted to come to this, I'm really excited for Scotland that you have a proportional system. It's brilliant. It's called additional member system. But it does mean, and again, sometimes people get a bit confused, that there are two different slips that you'll be given. And one, as Danny pointed out, is about the constituency representative. And that is really done under sort of first past the post. And then you've got the regional list, which is this top up where you can vote for a party. I don't know why I've got the local council bit there. That's coming on later. And I think that one of the sad things about elections is that we talk about how important they are, but then we don't always tell people how to vote. And I think that can put some people off because it can feel really confusing. The other thing that I really do want to remind people is that if you can apply for a postal vote. Everyone can apply for a postal vote. That you don't need a special reason. And postal votes are great, and they are secure and they're safe and they're really important. And you can apply for them through the same link that was on the other slide. You can also, if you know you're going to be abroad or in hospital or something else, apply for a proxy vote for someone else to go for you to vote. So there are three like relatively easy ways of being able to vote in that election. Local elections, like Holyrood, all people who are registered can vote, and people who live here can vote. They use a different system though, and it's really funny because you'll find a lot of people are very patronising about our ability as human beings and voters to understand different systems, but there are different systems. And the single transferable vote means that you rank candidates, so you can give them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, different preference votes. Gives you more choice, and it also means that those candidates have to all work harder for your vote, because they know that if they pick up the second vote, it might actually edge them into a seat. Westminster, of course, as Danny pointed out, is not so equal, and they have really, really tough criteria about who can vote, and mostly it's only people who they deem to be appropriate. Really interestingly for me, that under the last government, they expanded the franchise to people who live overseas, who haven't even been in Britain for 15 years, and allowed them to vote in the elections here, but didn't let people who have lived here for 15 years vote. What's that about? And Westminster, apart from being exclusive in who it allows to vote, it also elects people under the world's worst system, first past the post. And that means a couple of important things for all of us here. Very few votes count, and your vote counts basically where you live, not on who you vote for. Some seats matter more than others. And Keir Starmer won the last election with 34% of the vote. And that is quite shocking. Sir John Curtis, who is up at the University of Strathclyde, has recently warned that the next election, which is going to happen before 2029, someone could actually secure a total majority on 29% of the vote. So really the system is failing, and part of that is because at Westminster, people know their votes don't count, so they stay at home. So we're really looking forward to this representation of the people bill, which was launched today. And again, I've put a link in there. Which we think is a golden opportunity to campaign for votes for migrants, and we will be supporting the brilliant Migrant Democracy Project on that, and also changing our voting system to ensure that all votes count equally. It's going to be an uphill battle because we know that people, once they're in power, they don't like to relinquish it. But 60% of the people of the UK public think we should change the voting system to make it fairer. So I am hopeful that at some point we will have a government who listens. So I think just to recap briefly, remember that as long as you are resident here and you have registered to vote, pretty much everyone can vote in Scotland at both local and the Scottish Parliament elections. It's just Westminster that really lets you down. I think the other important thing to remember, and I should have put this in here, is that for the Scottish elections and the local elections, you do not need ID. But when it comes to Westminster voting, you absolutely have to have ID, and it can't be a photocopy, but you can apply for a free ID card if you haven't got one. And under this representation of people bill, they are looking at increasing the amount of ID that you can use within those elections. But it's really important that you make sure you get ID, otherwise they won't let you vote, which would be really sad. If you would like to get more involved in Fair Votes, please do get in touch with me. But also, as I say, I'm desperate to help the people get their franchise. So I shall be helping Danny and her team to make sure they get votes. And that's me.
Thank you so much, Emma. That was very comprehensive. Elise, can you stop the recording?
Yep, I am.